if you're increasing the energy and you're simultaneously getting people to configure their goals, and those two things are happening at the same time, that should increase the probability that the goals that they adopt will be instantiated permanently into memory. And then it's also not exactly the kind of memory that you would call to mind to talk about. It's the kind of memory that you see the world through.
Yeah.
So that's that's procedural memory. It's a completely different kind of memory.
I get it.
It's the kind of memory that, so let's say you practice applying a certain framework of interpretation to your circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, that practice reconfigures procedural memory. And that's literally that's the rewiring of the system through which you view the world.
That's correct.
Right.
And when you have a new view of the world, you come up with new meanings. And meanings, as you know, we both know, your maps of meaning. My entire life has been, I remember reading Man's Search for Meaning. I'm actually making the film. And it was one of the books that influenced me the most, because the ability to find meaning, even in this difficult time. And Viktor Frankl, to me, is just a godsend to this planet.
It's a great book.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's great.
If you haven't read it, please, whoever you're listening, read it. Or anybody's
It's
ever.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
Read that book.
It's incredible. But the point of your meanings change, your focus and your meanings change when your energy shifts. And so it's so fundamental to bring that energy up. And most people have no reference for it in their body. If you go to a concert, I remember Pat Riley came to one of our, who owns a piece of the Miami Heat. He was an amazing coach. If you're not familiar with the NBA basketball, one of the winningest coach in history. Good friend of mine, known him for 30 years. And he came to one of our programs and he said, "Tony, this is like the 7th game of the NBA championship, but it goes on for 4 days and it's 13 hours a day."
Right.
So that vibrancy, and most people at the game are cheering at times and not. This is an experience in your body. That's why I do the number of hours. That's why it's immersion. That's why it's multiple days, 4 days or 6 days. And that's why it has the lasting impact. But you're right. The dopamine circuits are actually creating, what's the white matter in your brain? The myelin, right? Creating the myelin.
Yeah, right? That's right. They think in the myelin.
Look at a great athlete, people look at somebody like, I'm fortunate enough to own a piece of several sporting teams, and one of them is the Golden State Warriors. And you look at Steph Curry, the greatest 33-point shooter in the world. And people look at him and he goes and he shoots the ball from like almost half court, and he's chomping on the side of his mouthpiece, and he doesn't even wait to go. He turns and smiles, and he knows. And then all of a sudden the crowd goes wild and they go through. It's like, it looks like impossible. Mm-hmm. But where did that impossible come from? He built the myelin over and over and over again. So it's hardwired.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows exactly what to do. Now, how do he do that? This is the part that we all forget. I always tell people, when you see people who are amazing in public, they're being rewarded in public for what they've practiced massively in private.
Yes.
So here's his plan. Just take 15 years in the NBA. That's all he's been there. Greatest 3-point shooter in history. Nobody even close if you're not familiar with the NBA. He practices 500 shots a day, every day, 7 days a week, bar none. That's 3,500 shots a week. It's 168,000 shots a month.
Right.
2.52 million shots, not forget his college career, just in his professional career, so that he can make 3,300 3-point shots and be the greatest in history. That's less than 1/10 of 1% of the time was it compared to his practice.
Right.
So the wiring in him is so powerful, but it doesn't just show up. Hope and excitement are wonderful things, but you need competency as well. And in order to have that, the hope can get you started, give you the drive, the vision, the aim, but you've got to have the execution. You have both the strategy and you've got to have the execution that's practical in your nervous system.
So let's talk about that, because you talked about eliciting motivation over a long period of time. So I'd like to know more about
I would even say the word, if I may, drive. Because motivation is, the reason I use it, it's like a warm bath. You should probably take a bath, but it doesn't last, right? You should still do it. But drive is like, everyone is motivated. If you're overweight, you're motivated to eat, right? Come on. I want to find out what drives you, because if we unleash your drive,
what drives you towards the right aim.
That's right. What is it that will unleash you? That's what this experience is about. That's different than just being motivated.
Okay, so let's walk. Okay, so I have an exercise that people can do online called future authoring, and one of its steps, and I'd like you to tell me how this compares to what you're doing in your seminars, in your events. So it's a conditions of satisfaction exercise, or it's a meditation and contemplation exercise, or it's a prayer. You could think of or a request for revelation. But here's the idea. So it's, you imagine for a moment that you could have what you wanted and needed in 5 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. But there's a condition. You have to know what it is and you have to specify it. Okay. Now then the question would be, well, how are you going to discover that? And the answer is you ask yourself. It's like, okay, like what would, it's like the Viktor Frankl scenario. Even hypothetically, what would get me out of the bed in the morning on a very, very difficult day?
Yes.
Like, what could I imagine could come to me in my life?
Get you up early.
Yeah.
Make you feel fully alive.
Yeah. Well, right. What would make you persevere in times of trouble?
Exactly.
It's even a more direct question. Yeah. Okay. So,
and by the way, I find, tell me if it's the same for you.
Yeah.
It's not just the aim or objective. It's strong enough reasons. In other words, somebody say, I want to make $1 billion, but they don't do it. And they even vision to get excited about $1 million, whatever it is. I want to have 3 perfect children. I want to write a book, whatever. The secret is reasons come first, answers come second. Once I know what I want, I got to figure out why.
Yes.
Because purpose is stronger than object. So the object may inspire you, but what's going to keep you going is strong enough reasons when it's tough. What are the reasons? Okay, I want this money. For what? Well, I want to provide a home for my mom. Well, that's very different than I just want to have this pieces of paper with pictures of dead people on it, right? And people say, I want money. They don't want money. They want an emotion. They want an impact. They want security, or they want freedom, or they want to be able to contribute, or they want to do something they think money will give them more choices on, right? They don't want the money. So I'm always trying to dig underneath to figure out what is the
that's the substructure.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
That's the surface desire.
Right.
And many people focus on the surface desire, not knowing enough reasons to follow through. That's why New Year's resolutions don't work. 91% of them, you know, what the latest statistic is, people don't follow through after 3 weeks. By the time they're hearing us speak, if they had New Year's resolutions, they're gone because they don't have the reasons to push through and they don't have the strategy. It's wonderful if you say, I want to see a sunset, but if your strategy is start running east as fast as you can, I don't give a damn how positive you are. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of that aim, those values, that drive you and I are talking about, that ignite, enough reasons for it, and then strategies to execute, because you'll eventually find your way there, but the speed at which you do it is if I believe in modeling. I believe success leaves clues. My original teacher, Jim Rohn, taught me that. He said, if someone is successful at anything, they've got a great relationship and it's 20 years down the line and they still do it. Or they lost weight and kept on for 10 years. Or they went from nothing to not just making money, but sustaining financial security and freedom for their family. They're not lucky. They're doing something different than you are. So instead of you trial and error, which is the standard way in which we learn, you find the pathway to power by finding someone who's done it consistently and produced results. That obsession within me has launched most of the books I've written, most things I've done. It's like, I want to know what, this book was, how do I help people with the best breakthroughs in health, for example, life force and energy. They take 17 years to go from the breakthrough time to your clinician. Like, how do I shorten that up? I'm going to interview 150 of the most brilliant regenerative doctors in the world, Nobel Prize winners, and find out what they're doing and give it to you right now. Or I'm going to finance. Well, I can talk to you finance about what I think, or I can go interview 50 of the smartest financial people in the history of the world that are alive today and find out what do they do. And while they're different, I look for what are the common strategies, elements. What is guiding this? And then I can teach that. My billionaire client goes, this is incredible. And the average person goes, this is incredible. Because it's about, it's very much what you do. It's finding the pathway. It's finding the DNA. It's finding the codex of how to go from where you are to where you want to be. But it is more than just the aim. That'll switch you. Yeah. You've got to have the purpose or the reasons or your purpose. If it's somebody else's purpose or reasons, well,
it's not going to work. No,
then you need the strategies too, because that'll give you the drive, and you will figure it out if you can discipline your disappointment. If you can push yourself beyond what most people give up on, you're going to get there eventually. You're going to keep flexing, but you'll get there 10 times faster if you can say, wow, there's already a pathway that's been proven. Why would I reinvent the wheel? I'll still bring myself to it, my own uniqueness to it. But there's certain fundamentals that if you do them, you're going to have economic abundance. If you don't, you're going to have pain.
That's actually the purpose of stories.
Pardon me?
That's the purpose of story.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so you said something that I think we could delve into technically too. Okay, so you said a name isn't sufficient. It'll get you started. Okay, and then you said you have to have reasons. Okay, so let's think that through for a minute. So one of the things we do in this program that helps people rewire their aim is do a multidimensional analysis. And we step people through that. It's like, okay, now you've sort of figured out what you would want and need if you could have it. But let's flesh that out. So you could say, well, how would that positively affect your intimate relationship, your marriage, right? How would that positively affect your family? How would it affect your community?
So you're
what would it mean to your future?
Reasons. Yeah,
well, then you could imagine this too. You could imagine that, like, in some ways, we're loose constellations of multiple motivations, and you want to meld those all together so they're serving the same aim.
The pull.
And then you're not
as opposed to being pulled apart.
Exactly.
I want to be totally successful and never be rejected.
Right.
If you're going to be successful on a social scale, that's not possible. And so if you have those two conflicts, you're going to take 2 steps forward and 3 back. And that's what we do with people. Have them re-engineer the values so they pull you forward as opposed to pull you apart.
Yes.
Because most of us have so many conflicts. It's a lack of clarity usually.
Yes.
There's not a clear aim. There's not enough reasons.
Yeah.
Poor strategy. But ultimately what really stops people, and what I do with people in events, is I find the inner conflict.
Yes, definitely.
The inner conflict is what's keeping them from executing.
Yeah, it means they're actually living out multiple stories simultaneously, and they don't have the same aim.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And it's okay too. It doesn't have to all be the same story, but there has to be some unifying element to what matters most to you for you to live an extraordinary quality of life. Again, life on your terms. What you think extraordinary. Is that 3 children? Is that writing a book? Is that building a business? Is that all the above? I don't know.
Okay, so
it's got to be on your terms.
So one of the things I discovered when I was walking through the biblical stories is the book itself is structured in a manner that's analogous to the pattern that you just described. So what happens in the biblical stories is that a sequence of stories are put forward that each circulate around a form of high order goal. So I'll give you an example. So in the story of Noah, for example, the voice of the divine in the story of Noah is characterized as the intuition that calls the wise to prepare when trouble is brewing, right? So that's God for Noah. Because Noah is described as a man who's wise in his generation. So he's the sort of person you'd go to for advice. And his ability to intuit is well developed in consequence of his practice of wisdom. And everyone recognizes that. And now he has a powerful revelation or intuition that all hell's about to break loose and he should take appropriate steps. And that's his faith in God. But God in that, the highest goal, you might say, in that story is this intuition of the wise to prepare in the face of disaster. Okay, that's very different than the God that makes himself manifest to Abraham. Yeah. So Abraham is someone who's resting on his laurels and who's privileged at the beginning of the story. His parents are wealthy, and there's no reason for him to lift a finger. And God comes to him as the voice of adventure. And God says to him, it's very cool. This is the covenant, by the way. And I'm sure you'll see the relationship between this and what you're doing in your seminars. God comes to Moses as a spirit of adventure, and he offers him a bargain, which is the covenant. He says, if you leave your zone of comfort, if you move away from your father's tent, if you move away from what's familiar to you, and you do that voluntarily, and you make the sacrifices necessary as a consequence, this is what will happen.
If you persist long enough, because it took you like 98 to have his first kid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But he didn't give up. He just kept moving forward. It didn't matter if he made mistakes. He kept moving in the right direction.
Yes, and that's partly the element of his faith. Okay, so the deal is your life will become a blessing to you. So that's that antidepressant phenomena that we're describing. Yes. So instead of living in misery, you'll live in something approximating hope and security, right? Okay, that's the first part of the deal. The second part is your name will become renowned among other people and you'll deserve it. Mm-hmm. So that's a good deal because people want social status and they want the security and the capacity to cooperate and compete peacefully that goes along with that. It's a fundamental, it might even be the fundamental human aim, but it's at least a fundamental human aim. That's number 2. Number 3 is it'll give you your best shot at establishing something of multi-generational permanence. Right. So that's a good deal because, one of the things that people want when they search for what's meaningful is that they say, well, I'd like to do something that lasts or matters.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the 3rd thing. And the 4th thing is you'll do it in a way that'll be of a benefit to everyone else. So it's not a zero-sum game.
Yes.
And so it's so cool, this story, because what it does is align the calling of adventure, so that would be that calling or pull, with those 4 outcomes. Okay, but then there's a meta move in the
which gives you more reasons, because we'll always do more for those we love than we will for ourselves.
That's right.
That's the beauty of being human. That's humanity at its best, right?
Yes, that's why you want to think through, if you do have an aim, what the benefit would be to the people that you love and to your community.
That's right.
Because it anchors it. Okay, the meta claim in the juxtaposition of these narratives, this is so cool, is that the voice that tells the wise to prepare in the time of crisis and the call to adventure are manifestations of the same distal goal.
Yes.
So you could imagine that the ultimate uniting goal brings all the underlying potential stories together.
Yes.
And then that's developed through the biblical corpus. And in the New Testament, that's fleshed out completely, because the claim in the New Testament is something like the embodiment of the Spirit that's characterized in multiple ways in the Old Testament is made manifest as the willingness for voluntary self-sacrifice in service of the highest goal. And that's what's acted out in the Passion story. And that seems to me to be precisely accurate, is that there's that, because you said yourself earlier, that a goal that is only serving your own, so to speak, narrow and proximal motives isn't one that's going to last. It has to be anchored in multiple ways, and it has to be worthwhile. But there is this insistence I think this is the monotheistic hypothesis, actually, is that there is a distal aim that unites all subordinate aims. And if you can ally yourself with that, you become something approximating an unstoppable force.
100%. Yeah, that's where all the energy comes from. There's so much. I look at it this way. You can call it God or you can call it life, whatever I prefer God, but still, life supports whatever supports more life. So as an individual with my own goals, take your bees, the bumblebee could be selfishly going after just the nectar for itself, if you want to call that selfish, but then what attaches to its legs is pollen, and that's why we have more flowers, right? So there's a certain amount of benefit by anyone's individual desire of the Father, right? It's like with that desire is the ability to fulfill it if you can persist and discover. But I found that I believe that when your desire is to serve something more than yourself, first of all, you get out of yourself. So there's no more the internal anxieties and fears.
That's for sure.
You're not there.
Well, those are, that concern, thoughts of yourself and neurotic suffering are so closely allied statistically that you can't separate them. So if you are thinking about your narrow self,
that's
the definition of misery.